Hey guys, welcome back to A Page in the Chapter, or welcome if you are new here. My name is Paige and today we are going through my August wrap. No, it's not August. We're going through my September wrap up. I am absolutely freezing today. Like, I have my blanket, I have a thick jumper on, I've got some really hot tea. Apologies if everything looks a bit unprofessional today because I'm just absolutely freezing. I don't know what's going on with this house, but I cannot get warm. But anyway, today we're going through my September wrap up, all of the 10 books that I managed to read in September. I honestly haven't felt like I've read a lot this month at all, but now that I'm looking back, the beginning of the month seems ages ago. I'm just a little confused at how I've managed to read 10 books when I honestly haven't felt like I've read really anything this month at all. If you guys like these wrap-up videos and you like what you have seen so far, why not hit that big red subscribe button down below and stay tuned for future content. I upload twice a week on a Wednesday and a Friday, so there's no shortage of bookish content here. You guys should also go and check out my October TBR, aka my magical hopathon TBR, because the day that you are watching this, the readathon has started and I will be reading away trying to read 13 books in that month. So you guys should go and check out that video if you're interested. And I don't believe I have anything more to say, so let's get into the books. So the first book that I read in the month of September was Ace of Spades. I read this when I was retroactively completing Pixarathon, and I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I liked it a hell of a lot more than I anticipated I was going to like it. So I did vlog my experience of reading this, and you guys can go and check out my Pixarathon vlog if you want to actually see this in action. But essentially this is a very Gossip Girl meets A Secret History plot. It follows our main characters and they are at this very prestigious preppy high school. Pretty much everyone in this world is really very rich except for one of our 2 main characters, Devon. In their senior year, these characters are being targeted by an anonymous person known as Aces, and they have really deep, genuinely life-changing information that they are leaking through social media. So it's very Gossip Girl. However, it's much darker than Gossip Girl. This is like very much a YA thriller, and I did get kind of freaked out whilst reading this book. It did put me on edge. Even though this wasn't my typical read and I was kind of tempted to put it down because it was freaking me out, I just couldn't. So that's why I gave this 4 stars. What I particularly enjoyed about this book is that YA books are really starting to delve into some much deeper and broader topics that I think need to be discussed in YA. One of the reviews on the blurb of this book did kind of spoil it for me. Like, it's not an objective spoiler, but it gave me an added clue that helped me work out what was going on before I really got there in the story, so that was a little bit disappointing. All in all, it's just good to see that YA is no longer just fluffy contemporary romances and we're actually starting to get some really serious discussions going on in that genre. It's really nice to see. And then the next book that I read for Pixarathon was The Gilded Ones. This book really took me by surprise. I gave this 5 stars. I will be pre-ordering the second book in the series. I really thought this was going to be another like very middle of the road YA fantasy. I got really into it, much more into it than I ever expected to get into it. This book follows a world in which there is an extremely patriarchal society, and all young girls, when they reach a certain age, have to go and take part in this purity ritual where they're cut, and if they bleed red then they are pure and they can go on to become members of society and get married, etc. And if they bleed something else then there's something really wrong with them, and no one actually knows what happens to the girls who don't bleed red, but they know it's something bad. And when our main character goes to the reaping, she exhibits a strange power that she didn't know she had, and then she bleeds gold, which leads her on a rather big adventure. And honestly, it just completely blew me away. This book is very much a dissection of the patriarchy and looks closely at how women in such a patriarchal society act and band together. Again, it was just another really great element to see explored in such a depth in YA. It was the kind of depth and deconstruction that you don't expect from a YA fantasy, and it felt more adult in that sense, which could be why I enjoyed it so much. And I didn't once see where this book was going. You get to a point with fantasy, particularly YA fantasy, but really all fantasy, you can just kind of predict where things are going. You've seen enough of these things now to be able to work out what's going on. Not this book. It takes you on so many twists and turns. You don't know who to trust, you don't know who's good, you don't know who's bad. You don't even know if you can trust the main character. She might be evil. So honestly, did not see where this was going. And it all wrapped up very nicely in this book. So Namina Forna really has a completely blank page to play with in the next book, which I'm really excited to see. I wouldn't have thought that this was going to have a sequel, but it is. I'm intrigued. And then I kind of dipped out of my comfort zone with this next book. We were in September. I think it was a cold weather day, and I was just really feeling very like Rory Gilmore. I was just in the mood to get all Gilmore Girls-esque, so I decided to pick up one of my cloth-bound classics. I picked up Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf just because I'd seen some people on the internet say that this book was actually quite fun, actually quite accessible, and so I decided to pick it up, and this is actually the only one that I have in pink, so I need to pick up more pink books to add to my rainbow. Now, this book follows a day in the life of Mrs. Dalloway, and it is all set over a 24-hour period. And I really enjoyed the beginning of this book. I thought it was really accessible and easy to read in the beginning, and I was like on track to actually think that I would enjoy a classic enough to give it more than a meh 2 or 3 stars. But this book is so long. It went on for way too long to be just about 24 hours, and I did then start to find it difficult to follow. There would be perspective changes and scene changes and all of these things, but there are there's absolutely no chapters in this book, and I think there's only like 1 or 2 like paragraph breaks, like different like clear sections of paragraphs in this book to indicate that there's been some change in perspective or scene, and so then I just found it really difficult to follow. And I completely understand how, as you're putting out classics, you want to keep them as close to the original format as possible, but like Penguin, honey, no one's gonna kill you for adding in some page breaks. Like, please help me out here. However, I did really enjoy the themes of aging in this book. I particularly enjoyed that the fears of our female characters aging was contrasted so strongly with how the male characters reacted to aging, and it's just an awareness that I have gained as well about aging. It was nice to see this contrast being played out on paper. It was definitely an easier reading experience than I've had with other classics. I just feel like this book fell into the trap that most classics fall into, and that it was way too long and in need of some serious editing. But then we found a favourite, and I read Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Did not disappoint, and you've seen me rave about this book in my 5-star book video. I'm just in general on my Bookstagram, on Goodreads, really every social media I discuss how obsessed I am with Taylor Jenkins Reid and how she can do no wrong. And this book was no different. This is my least favourite Taylor Jenkins Reid book that I've read, but it's still one of the best books I've ever read, if that makes sense. It's just a testament to how good Taylor Jenkins Reid is. This is told in a series of interviews with a band called Daisy Jones and the Six, who in the 70s were reaching the absolute pinnacle of fame, reaching new heights of fame that hadn't really been seen in the 70s before, had just released the record of the year, were on track to have an absolutely incredible tour, and then they break up and disappear from the music industry pretty much forever. And this book is told as an interview to find out from every single band member why the hell it broke down. It is a truly incredible book. I got to the end of this book and just cried because it had ended. It's not a sad ending, it's not a particularly sad book as far as Taylor Jenkins Reid goes. I just did not want it to end. I love the way Taylor Jenkins Reid writes. I love the flashbacks and all the different perspectives. Daisy Jones herself is probably my favourite Taylor Jenkins Reid character. I just thought she was so interesting, so complex, and so unlike any character I've ever read before. And this book has so many layers. You keep thinking that you found the reason that the band has broken up, and you think you found it like way before the book ends, and you're like, this is the problem, and then you're like, no, this is the problem, this is what it's going to be, and it just keeps becoming a bigger and bigger picture. You are spoon-fed so many little details, and then it all just somehow snaps together right at the end. It's incredible, a great experience. This is a nice, lovely floppy paperback. It's not the floppiest of backs ever seen, but it's got some pretty nice flop to it. It does make for like very easy, like fun reading. I then decided that I was going to pick up the Crazy Rich Asians trilogy. I managed to get all 3 of these books on Books to Door for £10 for all 3. I will say the covers are ever so slightly different, and they're all from different publishing houses, which is why I assume they're able to get them so cheap. For £10 for 3 books, I can get over the spines of the books being ever so slightly different. I really did not like them. They were the biggest letdown of the year. I really enjoyed the movie. I watched it whilst I was isolating because I had COVID. I loved it. It was so funny, so light-hearted. I loved the plot and what it was all about. If you don't know, this follows our main character Rachel, and she's pretty much grown up in New York, and she is an economics professor at NYU, and her boyfriend takes her home to meet his family for the first time because there's a big family wedding, and she finds out that they're not just like ever so slightly rich, they are like the richest family. The movie does a really great job of cutting through all of the absolute nonsense in this book and getting to the humour and finding the opportunities for humour and running with that, and these books are just so long. I gave the first one 3 stars, I believe, because it was slightly more enjoyable and I felt like this one had a plot to it. My biggest complaint about this one though was that it was an 150 page plot in a 400 page book. As much as I didn't enjoy all the rambling sections that were not necessary in this book, at least the bits of this book that were relevant were enjoyable and were funny. But then when I started China Rich Girlfriend, every issue that Crazy Rich Asians had, this one was just exemplified in this book. Like this was a book where I was like, I don't know how this was allowed to be published. Like who edited this, because you need to do a better job. There's literally 3 things that happen in this book, and it's a 400 page book and only 3 things happen, and more, I'd say 200 of those pages are just about random characters flying to different parts of the world to shop, and it's just the details of their shopping and how much they're spending, and it's like, we get it, they have a lot of money. I don't want to read about this, I want to read about actual things that are going to influence the plot. And I understand that it's a middle book, but don't make it a trilogy if you just don't have anything to put in the middle book. Just have a duology, it's not very hard. And then I just thought the ending of this book was absolutely ludicrous, and I just really hated the ending. So it was an unenjoyable experience the entire way through, and I have absolutely no interest in finishing this trilogy now. I'm sure the 3rd book would be a little bit more like this one, but I'm sorry, it was like 3 star, 1 star. I'm really not that fussed. I'm very happy to be DNFing this series now. I'm over it. And then after that mess, I finally decided to pick up Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. It is a Greek myth retelling of Ariadne, who is a princess of Crete, and she falls in love with Theseus, the prince of Athens, and it tells her story of escaping with Theseus from Crete and then being abandoned by Theseus and how she gets by. I'm a little bit conflicted about this book, to be honest. I felt like it was very surface level and tried to do a little bit too much. This book honestly covers from when Ariadne is a teenager to like, I want to guess in her like 40s, but we're not given ages. It spans a really long period of time, and I don't think it does it very well. It feels a little bit like Circe by Madeline Miller, but Ariadne has much more of a visible plot line throughout it, whereas this is more of a character study. Having read this and like not found it to be awful, I am interested to go back and reread Circe and see if I enjoy it a little bit more now that I know that it doesn't have a clear plot, because this wasn't that bad. This book also kind of has branded and marketed itself as being a feminist retelling of Ariadne. And I don't know why every single publishing house is marketing all of these mythology books as feminist retellings, because this one just isn't. The only feminist notion about this book is that Ariadne has this awareness of the fact that she is completely at the mercy of the gods. She doesn't ever do anything to not be at the mercy of these gods though. And just knowing that you're in a patriarchal system as a woman, like having an awareness of that doesn't make it feminist. Whilst I did enjoy the experience, it was a pretty fast read for me. I was intrigued to see what was gonna happen. There was nothing glaringly unenjoyable about this book. I just feel like it was marketed incorrectly and missold to me and really tried to do too much. So then I didn't really care about any of the relationships that were being formed because it was all just moving too quickly to fit such a large time span in. I'm glad I bought it and read it just for how stunning this cover is. And then we come to The Vanishing Stair by Maureen Johnson. This is the second book to the Truly Devious series. I wasn't a massive fan of Truly Devious the book. If you remember, I read that book in January for my Denzel reviews, my January TBR, something like that. I will put it up in the iCards. And I only gave that book 3 stars because it just felt a little bit too YA, a little bit too fast-paced. Just again, like didn't get the depth that I was looking for. However, I'm very happy to say that all of those issues were cleared up in this book. The tone felt a little bit older. Because it's a second book, it was really able to slow down, and it just felt like a darker book than the first one, which is honestly kind of what I was going for, and I just really enjoyed this. I immediately purchased The Hand on the Wall, which is the final book, and that arrived this morning. From what I have been told on Instagram, the third book continues to progress, continues to feel older, continues to be a bit more mature and is even better, so I'm really excited. And then my mood completely changed, and so we switched gears, and the last 2 books that I read this month were romances that I purchased on my Kindle. The first book that I read was Punk 57 by Penelope Douglas. This is a very beloved book on Book Talk. You know, Chandler Ainsley really enjoys Penelope Douglas and really liked this book, so I decided to give it a go and really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. Like, I'm actually going to buy a physical copy of this book because I enjoyed it so much. And this is a high school bully romance with all of the sexy scenes that you could possibly need, and actually has a good relationship aspect to it too. With enemies to lovers / bully romances, authors can go a little bit too hard on the enemies section and you get all that good tension that you're looking for, but then it can be a little bit hard to believe that they would actually fall in love and have a healthy relationship, so they become a little bit hard to root for. But I've read a lot of books. They do things to each other as enemies that you just know that if it were real you would not be able to get past those things, and I can happily say that that was not the case with this book. I think the enemies section of why they were enemies really made sense. Penelope Douglas had a really clever way of giving them a reason to be mad at each other whilst also giving them a reason to be in love with each other, and I really enjoyed seeing their relationship flourish. I think the smutty scenes in this book were really perfectly spaced out. You got plenty of tension before you got to the full-on smut. I just thought that the balance in this book was just really good. The balance of enemies to lovers was good, the balance of smut to romance was good, and I was just really happy with this book, and I will be purchasing a physical copy as well as owning the ebook. And then the final book I purchased yesterday and finished this morning, and that is the second off-campus book by Elle Kennedy, but this follows Logan and Grace. I kind of was very middle of the road about the first off-campus book, and I preferred this book. I felt like Logan and Grace had a lot more chemistry. I found them easier to root for. They had a very non-typical romance storyline, which I really appreciated from Elle Kennedy. Like, this book doesn't have the typical structure of a romance at all, and I really enjoyed that. There are less triggers in this book. There are triggers for alcoholism, but I think the alcoholism is the only trigger in this book. I apologize profusely if I'm wrong, but that's the only one coming to mind right now. It was more enjoyable to read. I haven't rated it yet, but I think I'm gonna give it like a 3.5, 3.75 maybe. I don't feel like it's as good as Punk 57, so I don't want to give it 4 stars, but it's definitely better than The Deal, which I gave 3 stars. So somewhere in the middle. Here are 8 of the 10 books that I read in the month of September. I do keep forgetting what month I need to be saying. It didn't feel like a particularly good reading month when I was in it, but looking at it now and having discussed them, it was a pretty good reading month. I just feel like so many of these books weren't standout books, but towards the end of the month I really got my mojo back. I read The Vanishing Stair, Punk 57 and the off-campus book all within the space of 3 or 4 days, so it was just really nice to have that motivation and dedication to read again. So yeah, I have a very challenging TBR for October, but I feel like I've ended this month right with some really good books, and I'm just really ready to jump in. Thank you guys very much for watching, especially if you made it this far. If you did make it this far, then you might want to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for future content. As I said, there's no shortage. I will always be here to give you my genuine thoughts on books, and I hope that you enjoy that. You guys can also check me out on Instagram and Twitter at Page and Chapter, where you'll just get more behind the scenes stuff and you'll get updates as I read rather than waiting until the end of the month if you are interested. I hope you guys have a fantastic week and you enjoy everything you are reading and there are no reading slumps in your future, and I will see you next week for my next video. Bye guys.